Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It is 11, so we are going to go ahead and get started. A couple more folks may be trickling in, but this is being recorded, so I'm so grateful you all are here. And you can put your questions in the Q&A box. We'll be answering those at the end. And then slides will be distributed to folks after the presentation. I did want to let folks know about some upcoming events we have this week. We've actually got a lot going on this week. Tomorrow is our Ending Hunger, Improving Access to Safety Net programs. You don't want to miss out on that. And then Thursday is going to be Choices 101 Part 2, the PAE test. We're going to do a deep dive into that. That's the medical portion, and that will be led by me. So great, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Caroline Springer. I'm the Melkus Fellow here at Tennessee Justice Center. I do casework and help folks with programs of TennCare Medicaid. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about Tennessee Justice Center, just in case you don't know. We do a lot of work in direct services. That means individual client representation. That's through our casework as well as our litigation team. We also promote enrollment on healthcare and nutrition programs. And to continue on from that, I want to talk about our impact work. We do class action litigation to correct systemic issues with various agencies. We also advocate for legislative and administrative changes on a state and federal level. Just for two examples that we've got going on right now, we have the Paying Family Caregivers campaign and the Elderly Simplified Application Project, or ESAP for SNAP. So Paying Family Caregivers is all about making sure the folks that do this care work get paid, that they have options to be able to get paid. And then ESAP has to do with elderly folks being able to have a more simplified application for SNAP. For today's agenda, we'll be going over, again, the financial portion of choices. Thursday, we'll pick back up with the medical portion, which is the PAE test. So today, for the financial portion, we'll be talking about income, resources. We'll talk about QIT accounts, which are an account that you would use if your income is too high. And we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So just an introduction to choices. There are three categories of choices: choices 1, choices 2, and choices 3. Choices 1 and 2 are going to be what is called a nursing home level of care. And the difference between them is where you're receiving that care. So for choices 1, that's going to be in a nursing home. And choices 2 is a full array of HCBS, which is home and community-based services. That is care that is typically going to be happening at home or maybe an assisted living facility. This is considered full-time care. You also have a category of choices called choices 3. This is limited HCBS, or limited home and community-based services. This is going to be more of a part-time array of services for that. We've got our eligibility for each group. Typically in a choices application, the first part is the medical part, or the PAE test. And I'd love for folks to join me on Thursday to do an in-depth training all about the PAE test. But today we are going to be focusing on the financial part. And to go over what we'll be talking about, I'm going to touch on income, resources, and then gifts or transfers. We'll start with income. So for choices, there is a monthly income limit. The monthly income limit for choices in 2024 is $2,829. So that's all of your income coming in. That includes your Social Security check. It also includes other types of money coming in, such as pensions, certain checks from the VA, and yeah, those money that is coming in that form. So this considers For the income test, it considers the applicant's income only, not the household. So for choices, when someone is applying for choices and they're looking at their income, it's only that individual. Now, when we get into resources, that gets a little bit more complicated, but for the applicant, we're only looking at the applicant's income. We're also looking at gross income before any deductions. And you can see over here on the left, we've got this Medicare card example. So some folks may be on Medicare and they may get deductions for Part B or Part D. And you're going to want to count the income before any of those deductions. And I want to touch on a QIT account. Some folks may have more than $2,829 in income coming in. And most of the time we are able to find a workaround around that. And that's going to be what's called a QIT account or qualified income trust. I believe it's also called a Miller trust sometimes. So what's going to happen, the way that works is you would set up that account. The trustee of the account would write checks. So it'll be deposited into someone's bank account, the money coming in, and then you would want to immediately make sure that that goes into a QIT account, so that any income that's putting you over that limit is going into that account. It does require functionally a separate bank account. And I do want to emphasize that a QIT account is for income only. If your resources are too high, that money is going to have to be spent down or dealt with in some other way. Now we'll get into the resource test. So whereas income is your money that you have coming in, your resources are going to be the total value of things that you own. It can be money that's sort of just sitting there. And for your resource limit, for a single person, the resource limit is $2,000. It gets a little more complicated in cases where you have a married couple, but it could be up to $30,828, and that is for both people. That is, it's not each, if that makes sense. So $2,000 is the golden rule with that. And the big thing that TennCare is really looking at is if the asset is countable and available. So does this asset count according to TennCare's rules? You might start thinking, oh, I'm thinking about all the things I own. You know, I own clothing, I own certain valuables. A lot of those things are not going to count. It's only specific things under TennCare's policy that will be considered countable. And the other big thing that is important for TennCare purposes is that the asset is available, meaning that the person can access it, that they are able to actually use those funds in some type of way. I made this list of questions. These are questions in my casework that I frequently ask my clients to do a screening. So they may be helpful for you as well. I would ask folks if they own more than one car, if they own their own home, if they own any additional homes or property. You'd want to ask about any savings accounts, any burial accounts, a funeral or cemetery plot. I also ask folks, you know, do you have a 401k, a 403, or an IRA? And then I ask folks if they have a life insurance policy. The biggest thing with a life insurance policy for choices eligibility purposes is whether or not it has cash value and how much that cash value is. And then lastly, if somebody has an excess amount of resources, I would want to know if they are willing to spend those resources down. I've had clients who said, you know, I've worked really hard to earn this money in my savings account, and, you know, at this point, I'm really not willing to spend that down. So that is the client's choice, but we work with folks to make sure that they know those rules. So I want to talk about assets that are not counted. So these are things you don't have to worry about if you're applying for choices and you're thinking about the total value of things you own. So the first one would be a home. That's going to be a home you are living in or your spouse is living in, or some folks who are in the nursing home, if that's a home that you would intend to go back to if you are fit and able to do so, that home would not count. That would be one home that would not count. Another thing that doesn't count is a prepaid burial or funeral contract. If you own one automobile, that does not count. Personal property, things like clothing, a television, things like that, those do not count towards the resource limit. Business property will not count in certain circumstances. I personally have not had a case where I've had to really work with a business property. And then a life insurance policy that cannot be cashed in. So it does not have a cash value. And that goes back to what TennCare is looking for. Is this asset actually available? And in a case where a life insurance policy cannot be cashed in, that money is not able to be accessed by the client. And we're going to continue with assets that do not count. So this one can be a little bit complicated, and you might want to look into what's called conditional choices. Conditional choices applies when someone has excess resources that they need to spend down, but for one reason or another, they're having a difficult time doing that in a timely manner. So sometimes you can work with TennCare under conditional choices to be accepted with the agreement that you will spend those resources down, but you just are needing a little extra time to do that. So yeah, there are certain circumstances where a person is unable to access or to liquidate an asset. This can be for all kinds of complicated reasons. There might be a legal incapacity, so someone's not mentally fit to actually handle that resource. If it's in their name, you know, certain times, if you, for example, if you have a life insurance policy and the client has dementia, they're not fit to handle that asset or resource, but they don't have a power of attorney or a conservator, it might be really difficult to actually get someone to talk to you so that you can do what you need to do to liquidate it. The other thing is litigation might be preventing you from accessing it. Sometimes a joint owner will not cooperate, which can be really frustrating. But so conditional choices can be a great option if you're having those sorts of challenges. All right, and now we're going to talk about the assets that do count. These are the things you're really going to want to pay attention to with choices. But one thing I'll just say before Thursday is that if you have any interest at all in choices, I would recommend going ahead and getting a PAE test just to see if you would qualify medically, because more often than not, any kind of income issues, resource issues, those can often be resolved, even if you don't meet those requirements right now, but you're not going to know if you should think about spending those resources down if you don't even know if you're medically eligible. So you can get a PAE test as many times as you want, and yeah, we'll be talking more about that on Thursday. So the things you are going to want to be thinking about are non-home real estate, so any kind of other real estate. You know, most of our clients do not own multiple homes, but that would just be a case-by-case basis. If you own multiple homes or property, and again, non-home real estate, which might include business property and things like that. It would really just depend case by case. Multiple vehicles, if you have a second vehicle, a third vehicle, those are going to start to count. ATVs, boats, RVs, mobile homes, those will count. Bank accounts will count, or financial holdings. Retirement funds will count. Trust that have some access to funds for the applicant. A spouse's assets, including retirement, are going to be counted. So you will want to pay attention to spouse's resources. And then holdings that can be liquidated, such as the cash surrender value of a life insurance policy. So that is something in my casework I run into time and time again is if somebody is having a resource issue that's preventing them from getting on choices, or maybe is the reason that their choices has been terminated. The issue with life insurance policies tends to be that the cash value is too high to meet that resource limit, or there's some kind of issue with the cash value. All right, we're going to talk about a transfer of assets penalty. This is something you want to be really mindful of with choices. There's what's called the 5-year look back rule. So TennCare is going to be looking at really all of your resources in the last 5 years prior to your application. You want to be mindful of property. And something we might ask a client is, have you transferred property at any point in the last 5 years? But other things will also count, such as a savings. If you, for example, have a savings account, you've given away a large sum of money, that could potentially count under the 5-year look back rule. If the transfer was a gift or it was a sale for less than fair market value, that is going to be a case where a penalty may be imposed, and eligibility for those benefits could be you know, it could be a struggle. Yeah, so you want to be really mindful of that to make sure it's it depends what time period it's in. So it really depends. But yes, and then we'll keep going off of that. Transfer of assets penalty. So that can also include, yeah, this can get a little bit tricky. This is so another issue I run into beyond life insurance policy issues might be cases where someone has added an owner to a bank account. Something you want to be mindful with having multiple people's names on a bank account is if it's a commingled account, for my purposes, I would want to know whose money is in that account. Is it just the client's, or is it another person, such as a daughter or son? Because all of the money in that joint account is going to be counted towards the resource limit. Another thing that could get you into trouble is declining an inheritance. You could also run into trouble for purchasing an annuity that does not meet Medicaid rules, or declining alimony or other income. The biggest thing with these types of penalties is if the purpose of you giving away this money was so that you could obtain benefits and you gave it away as a gift, or you sold it for less than fair market value, that could get you into trouble. My boss gave me a great example the other day. We were running into an issue like this, and she said, if there's a client who gave money away as a Christmas present, and then 3 months later she needed choices and she applied for choices, that Christmas present most likely would not count because she did not give it away with the intention of obtaining benefits. She was just giving a Christmas present. So it really depends on a case-by-case basis. So this presumption may be overcome with more information. It really depends. But it can be quite tricky if you gave the money away for the purpose of obtaining benefits. You want to be really careful about that. The biggest thing I tell my clients again and again and again is, if I'm advising them to spend down, is make sure all of that money is going towards the applicant. So it's going towards really anything related to the applicant, and you would want to keep it's always a good idea to keep your receipts. Okay, continuing with the transfer of assets penalty. Certain transfers are not going to be penalized. In these cases, it would be between spouses would not be penalized if the transfer is to a child under 21, if it's to a disabled or blind child, or in the case of the home, if it's given to a lot of people are very concerned about their home being taken away, understandably, but that would not be penalized if it's given to a caregiving child or a sibling with equity interest. Now we'll talk about estate recovery. Estate recovery is, understandably concerning for a lot of people. The idea that TennCare could potentially take their home. And I try as best as I can to make sure people are informed about what estate recovery actually looks like, who it really applies to. So estate recovery may arise after the death of both the enrollee and the applicant's spouse. If the person does not have a spouse, it would just be after the enrollee would pass away. So estate recovery will only come up after this person has passed away. If the person has received choices or ECF choices at the age of 55 or older, this could come into effect. If, for example, if someone is under 55 and they pass away, this rule does not apply. TennCare cannot take the property. So this only kicks in once someone is 55 or older. And also an important thing is that they have to be enrolled at the time of death. So if, for example, somebody decided to disenroll off choices, which you can do at any time, and then passed away after that, their home would not be subject to estate recovery. So Tennessee currently uses a limited scope for estate recovery. It would apply to property passing through probate court. It would apply to real estate owned by the enrollee. And it would be mandatory for certain trusts, annuities, and ABLE accounts. So if you have accounts like that, you just want to be mindful about that. To continue off with state recovery, this applies only to the applicant's equity interest. If there is a mortgage, the mortgage is satisfied before a state recovery can apply. More on estate recovery. So estate recovery may be delayed if the enrollee is survived by a child living in the home. That child would have to be under 21 or blind or disabled according to Social Security Administration standards, or a caregiver child. I had a client who was very concerned about estate recovery because she had worked really hard to obtain her home, and she had a disabled child. She was worried that he might not have somewhere to live, and we assured her that she was also under the age of 55. So, you're under the age of 55, this does not apply right now, and you also have this disabled child. So in this case, that would not have counted. And estate recovery may not apply to certain things, such as certain business property, a caregiving child situation, a co-owner sibling, or in a undue hardship type of situation. Life insurance issues. So, like I was saying, life insurance issues are something I've encountered quite a bit. So if the cash surrender value is accessible, you're going to want to think about probably assignment to a funeral home and if that would be suitable. So essentially, I think about it like this. The resource limit is $2,000. And I always ask folks if they have a life insurance policy, what is the cash value? So if you, for example, have $500 in a savings account, you can have a life insurance policy with a cash value of $1,500, so long as it is $2,000 and no more than $2,000. So you can have a life insurance policy that has cash value. It would just have to be, your total resources would still have to be under $2,000. So if the cash value of your life insurance policy is anything over $2,000, you would need to address that in order to be eligible for choices under any of those categories. And one thing that we can recommend is that talking to a funeral home, and you can about an irrevocable funeral policy. That piece of it, that it's irrevocable, is really, really important. That's what would make it not count under the rules for choices. And if you have a cash surrender value, it's pretty high. We generally recommend legal consultation if that's accessible to you. That is advisable. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go to the chat and the Q&A box and see what questions folks might have. All right, we have a question. Does this apply to the 2,000 available assets? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Got Richard Johnson. You can type it or you can come off mute. Either way is fine. I don't know if you're able to actually as a participant. But I'm not sure what slide you would be talking about there. But so your income is your $2,829. That's the money coming in. Okay, asking in relation to asset compliance. No matter what in choices, your assets are gonna have to be below $2,000. And that's that basically what that means. So for example, someone might have a life insurance policy that's worth $10,000, but it only has a $2,000 cash value. The cash value is what is going to count. That $10,000 will not be part of that, if that makes sense. Income bank accounts, so savings accounts, checkings accounts, all of that has to be below $2,000. I hope that helps. All right, we have Anne is asking, an adult with disabilities, does their home count if they live with parents? An adult with disabilities. It would depend who the home, what name the home is, whose name the home is in. I think if you're living in the home, it should not count typically. But it would, I would want to make sure I had all the details before giving you a definitive answer. All right, we've got one question in the chat box. Could you give an example of calculating someone's resources? Yes. Let's go back to a previous slide. That might help. Oh, my slides are going off. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So the biggest things I run into, so most of the folks I work with do not own more than one car. They don't own more than, they might own a home, but they're probably not having to worry about other homes or property. Things I come across a lot are savings accounts. So a savings account might be too high. You would have to spend that down on the individual, on the enrollee. And then life insurance policy is what comes up the most for that cash value. And so typically, you may already know this, but the way it works is if you're not on TennCare already, you're going to apply for choices through the AAAD or the Area Agency on Aging and Disability. If you are already on TennCare, you're going to apply through your MCO. So that would be Blue Care, United, or WellPoint, which used to be AmeriGroup. Usually by the time I have a client that I've advised through that process, either the AAAD or the MCO is going to be looking at their financial information in more detail. And they are typically the ones who are retrieving those documents, I've had caseworkers who will go to a client's house and pick up bank statements, for example. You're going to want to pay attention to any letters that TennCare sends asking for additional information. They might ask for bank statements, proof of burial policy, proof of different things like that. So typically those folks are going to be the ones actually retrieving those and giving those to TennCare. I am typically not involved by that point, but I would get a call if there's a resource issue that has either gotten the person terminated or has prevented them from getting on. And at that point, I would be looking through TennCare's letters. There should be a letter explaining that, and I would have the client send me any of those documents. But personally, I'm not typically doing that calculation. But I would ask my clients all of these questions. And that agency, either the AAAD or their MCO, should work with them off that. All right, we got some more questions. Yeah, this is a really important point. How can anyone say that a single person being able to have only $2,000 and a married couple $30,000 is equitable? I have a lot of frustrations with the TennCare policy. but my job is to get folks enrolled as according to the policy. The way it often works is, like, for example, you have a married couple and one person will be in the nursing home. They will only have $2,000 in resources. This is because, you know, their basic needs, all of their needs really are going to be taken care of by the nursing home. That spouse who's still living at home is going to have different needs for what they actually need to live on a day-to-day basis, because they're not getting that that care covered by choices. So I don't know if that is helpful at all. Okay. If you took your name off a home in the past 5 years and added a child who does not live at the residence, would there be a period of ineligibility? Let me think about that. I think it could. It would really depend. It would depend who, it would depend. I would need more details to give you a real definitive answer. I know that's frustrating. Yeah, I would say I would want to get all the details with that one. And I would be curious to know who does live in the house. But yeah, again, what TennCare is really looking at is if you've given away, they call it like giving away money, giving a gift kind of thing. So I would want to look at that in more depth. Okay. Got another question. If someone makes $2,600 a month, they're under the cap of income, but does that count? That's a great question. People get quite confused on this. So I explain this to my clients a lot. So there's your income portion and there's your resources, and these are like really separate things. So you can have up to $2,829 coming in every single month. Any excess money is going to have to go into a QIT account. So that's one, the month that it is deposited, that counts as income. And then you also have your money over here, that's a $2,000 limit. So for example, this doesn't, I can't imagine someone would have a social security check this high, but let's just say they have $2,829, exactly the income limit. They have that income coming in, and then they have $2,000 in a savings account. That would be completely fine. However, if this person is able to save any money, like they're able to save, oh, I had $100 left over, that would then start to count as a resource towards the next month. So income, any money coming in counts as income the month that it is received. But then it will start to count as a resource if it sits any longer than that. All right, got a question. What happens to a married couple's income if one spouse decides to live in a nursing home and one spouse continues to live in the home? This is a great question. So for eligibility purposes, they're only going to be looking at the person going into a nursing home's income, but they are going to be looking at both folks for the resources. And a lot of folks can get what's called, I think it's called a community spouse allowance. They should, the person at home should be able to have enough money to continue to live. All right. Great questions, y'all. Are there many options available for claimants when a life insurance policy exceeds $1,500 cash value? That's a great question. Let's see. So, and again, like the resource limit, so out of all your resources have to be less than $2,000. You could have zero money in savings, a $2,000 cash value, that would be fine, as long as your total countable resources are less than $2,000. So let's see. Yeah, so the assigning it to a funeral home as an irrevocable policy is one option. Some people will actually decide to just fully get rid of their life insurance policy, you just want to be careful about that. You don't want to give it away. And you can spend that money. So if you're interested in more about that, you're welcome to call our intake line and then get a case going for that. Oh, this is a great question about a special needs trust. So a person currently with a special needs trust and the amount is over the $2,000 limit would need to spend it down. I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly about the special needs trust. I would wanna, yeah, I'd wanna get more information on that specifically. But that is a great, there are certain accounts, I think typically a special needs trust is not gonna count. I think it's similar the way an ABLE account typically doesn't count. But I apologize, I can't give you a more clear answer. Let me go back to the Q&A box, see if there's any other questions. Of course, you're welcome. Putting income bank accounts. Yeah, it's really, it really, there's no advantage or disadvantage necessarily if you own a home. But if you own a home and you live there, it doesn't count. Or if you own a home and you are in a nursing home and intend to go back if you're able to, that is an option that you have. Okay, I think I got that question in the Linda Brown's question in the chat. How hard is it to qualify for assisted living financially? So for choices, it's gonna be those same rules. So that's a great question about assisted living. Assisted living is typically going to fall under the choices 2 category. When you get your PAE test, they are going to tell you what your score is. They're going to tell you what medical level of care you're eligible for. And at that point, you have a choice of, do I want to go to a nursing home? Do I want assisted living? Do I want to be at home? So that would really just be a matter of qualifying, making sure you meet the medical requirements. We'll talk more about that on Thursday, but for choices 1 and 2, you're going to need a PAE score of at least 9 or higher. Choices three is lower. But financially, it would be the exact same. Hopefully that's helpful. An ABLE account, I'm not sure what it stands for exactly, but some people have an ABLE account. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it stands for. Let's see. Okay, great question. If assisted living costs more than Choices provides. So again, Choices 1 is going to be your nursing home level of care. Choices 2 is most often, again, it's the same level of care, it's full-time. But Choices 2 is typically going to be at home. And the thing TennCare wants to know if you're at home is, yes, we'll allow you to be at home so long as it doesn't cost more than what being in a nursing home would be. And I think the same rule would apply for assisted living. So for assisted living, you would just want to make sure that it wouldn't cost more than a nursing home. But typically at the point where you are looking into those options, you're going to already have had a PAE test. You're already going to have had a score, and that will have been approved by TennCare. And by that point, the AAAD or your MCO is going to be able to give you those options. So Medicare, some people who are needing, I'm not sure about Medicare with assisted living specifically. You would want to ask about that. Medicare does do what's called home health services. You can reach out to your primary care doctor and say, hey, I want to get an assessment for some home health services through Medicare, and just see if you can get an assessment that way. And that can be an option as well. But our office does not do Medicare. So I'm not actually sure if Medicare helps with assisted living or not. These are all great questions. Yes, of course, you're welcome. And we'll go over this more on Thursday. Folks may or may not already know this, but when you apply for choices, if you are approved for choices, that means you pass all the medical tests, you pass all of the financial tests, you're enrolled in choices, you will automatically get TennCare as well if you don't already have it. So for some people who don't qualify for TennCare any other way, this can be a category for them. Yes, thank you for including that link with the able accounts. Yeah, I don't run into able accounts too often, but some people have them. And I did want to post the link since y'all are so engaged for our webinar on Thursday in case you're not already registered. And you can go ahead and register there if you're not already. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And I'm not seeing any more questions, so I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. But I'm so grateful for you all for being here and for bearing with me. And hopefully I will see you on Thursday. So take care, everybody.